The stars were silent the night Ethan Cole fell from the sky. His ship, an old exploration vessel from Earth, had been hit by a meteor storm while crossing a forbidden sector. Sparks flew through the cabin as alarms screamed in his ears. He pulled on every switch, every lever he could reach, but nothing stopped the fall. The planet below, covered in endless green light, grew closer and closer until everything exploded into fire and darkness. When he opened his eyes, the world was still. His head pounded, his vision blurred. He was lying among broken metal and smoking wires. The air shimmered with a strange glow like living mist. The ground beneath him pulsed softly, almost like it was breathing. He realized then this was not Earth. Pain shot through his arm when he tried to move. His spacesuit was torn, blood dripping down his side. The communicator was dead. The ship was gone. For a moment he thought maybe he really had died and this was some strange afterlife. But then he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it. A cry. Small. Frightened. He froze. It was not human. The voice was high and soft, trembling with pain. He followed the sound through the wreckage until he found a small silver pod half buried in glowing soil. The door had cracked open and inside was a tiny creature curled up and crying. She looked no older than a human child, maybe 6 or 7. Her skin glowed faintly blue, her hair like threads of moonlight, and her eyes were the color of stars seen through water. She flinched when she saw him, pressing her hands to her face, whimpering in fear. Ethan's heart ached. He slowly crouched beside her, careful not to move too fast. "Hey," he said softly, even though he knew she couldn't understand him. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The child stared at him, her breathing quick and shallow. He reached out, showing her his empty hands, and smiled weakly. "See, no weapons." For a long moment she didn't move. Then hesitantly she reached toward him. Her small fingers touched his glove, and she whispered something he couldn't understand, but it sounded like a plea. Ethan looked around. The airship fragment still burned in the distance. Strange creatures howled somewhere deep in the glowing forest. He didn't know what kind of world this was or what dangers waited for them, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't leave her there. He gently lifted her into his arms. She was light, almost weightless, her body warm against his chest. When thunder rolled above them, she clung to him tighter, hiding her face against his suit. "It's okay," he murmured again, even though he was bleeding, even though he had no idea where to go. "I got you." He stumbled through the forest looking for shelter. The trees were tall and crystal-like, glowing from within. The ground glimmered with veins of silver. Every few steps he thought he saw movement, shadows slithering just out of sight. After hours of walking, he found a hollow tree large enough to crawl into. He set the child down gently, then collapsed beside her. She looked up at him with wide, shining eyes and touched his wounded arm. The place where her hand met his skin felt warm, almost healing. "Thank you," he whispered. Even though she didn't know his words, she smiled faintly, her eyes flickering like starlight. Then, exhausted, she fell asleep beside him. Ethan sat awake, staring at the alien sky through the cracks of the tree. The stars here were larger, closer, burning with colors he had never seen before. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt peaceful. Somewhere far away, a bright beam of light pierced the clouds. Strange ships glided across the horizon, their shapes like wings of glass. They were searching for something or someone. Ethan looked down at the child sleeping against him and whispered, "They're looking for you, aren't they?" He didn't know who she was. He didn't know what kind of world he had landed in. But one thing burned clear inside his heart. He would protect her. Whatever came next, whatever waited in this strange world, she was safe with him. And for the first time in a long, long while, Ethan felt like he had a reason to live again. The forest was alive with sounds that made Ethan's heart race. Strange creatures moved in the shadows, their eyes glowing like molten gold. The air smelled sweet but strange, like flowers and electricity mixed together. Every step he took, he felt the ground shift slightly beneath him, almost like the forest itself was watching. He held the alien child close, her tiny hands clutching his jacket, her head resting against his chest. Days passed slowly. Ethan scavenged what he could from the wreckage of his ship and from the forest. He found small fruits that tasted bitter but gave him strength. He drank from glowing streams, careful to watch for creatures lurking below the water. The child, he had begun calling her Aurelia, learned to mimic his words and gestures, giggling when she got them right. Her laughter was like music filling the dark forest with light. At night, Ethan wrapped her in his torn jacket and told her stories of Earth. He told her about green forests that smelled of pine, about rain that made puddles shimmer, about oceans that went on forever. She listened quietly, tilting her glowing head, and made small cooing sounds. He smiled at her, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in years. She was small and fragile, yet somehow she made him feel alive again. But peace didn't last. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the forest, bright lights cut through the trees. The forest seemed to freeze, and Ethan's blood ran cold. Sleek metallic ships hovered above, their surfaces reflecting the moon's light. Armed figures began descending, moving with precision and silence. "They're looking for her," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. Aurelia's tiny hands gripped his shirt as he crouched low behind a thick, glowing tree. His mind raced. These were not animals. These were soldiers, and they were fast. The creatures of the forest stirred and scattered as the alien soldiers moved. Ethan tried to carry Aurelia deeper into the woods, but the soldiers spread out, cutting off escape routes. He knew they wouldn't stop until they had the child. He felt a surge of panic and desperation. "Stay behind me," he murmured, holding her tight. They had weapons that hummed with strange energy, glowing and dangerous. He had nothing but his own hands, some broken tools from his ship, and the fierce determination to protect this child. The soldiers found them. Their leader, a tall figure with armor that shimmered like starlight, stepped forward, speaking in a language Ethan could not understand. The words were sharp and commanding, but the tone held something softer when the child responded. She whimpered and reached for Ethan, her small voice calling out his name. "Ethan!" Ethan stepped forward, shielding her with his body. "Go, take me, not her," he shouted, hoping his voice carried some meaning to them. But the soldiers didn't hesitate. One of them struck him with a weapon, throwing him backward. Pain exploded through his chest. His vision blurred, and he felt himself losing strength. Aurelia screamed, and for a moment, Ethan thought the world would end. But then she was taken from his arms, lifted effortlessly by the soldiers. She reached for him, tears streaming down her glowing cheeks, calling his name again and again. He struggled to rise, but his body refused. The forest seemed to close around him, echoing the emptiness in his chest. He wanted to fight, to run, to do anything, but the soldiers were gone before he could act. Only the echo of her cries remained, fading into the distance. Ethan collapsed to the ground, his hands clutching the air where she had been. His heart pounded with guilt and helplessness. He had saved her once, and now she was gone. The forest that had once felt alive now felt cold and silent, a witness to his failure. But deep inside him, something burned. He had survived crashes, storms, and strange worlds before, but this loss was different. He could not let her disappear into the unknown without him. He whispered into the empty forest, "I will find you, Aurelia. No matter what it takes, I promise." The trees swayed, the glowing mist curling around him, and for the first time since the crash, Ethan felt a renewed determination. The hunt had begun, and he would not rest until he had the child back. Ethan awoke to light that hurt his eyes. He blinked slowly, trying to remember where he was. The forest was gone. Instead, he was lying on a soft surface that shimmered like liquid silver. He sat up, wincing at the pain in his chest and side, and realized he was inside a building unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were tall and smooth, glowing faintly, and the ceiling seemed to stretch into the sky itself. Strange patterns of light moved across the surfaces like living rivers. Alien guards, tall and thin, with armor that reflected every color of the spectrum, stood around him. They didn't speak, but their presence was commanding. Ethan tried to rise, but his legs trembled. A soft melodic hum filled the air, almost like music made by wind and stars combined. Then she appeared, the Queen of Varelia. She moved with grace, yet there was a power in her that made the air feel heavier. Her skin glowed like polished silver, and her eyes held the calm of endless galaxies. She stopped a few feet away from him, her gaze steady and unyielding. "You saved my daughter," she said, her voice translated by a small device, smooth and commanding. "You risked your life for her. Few of your kind would." Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of her words. She's just a child," he said, his voice hoarse. "Anyone would have done the same." The Queen's lips curved slightly into a faint, knowing smile. "No human. Not anyone." He looked at her, trying to understand. "I didn't ask for anything. I didn't want anything. I Couldn't leave her. The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, the light around her shifting and glowing brighter. You understand loyalty and compassion in ways even my people rarely do. That is why I have brought you here to protect you and to honor you. Ethan shook his head. I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere on this world. I was just trying to survive and help her. Belonging, the queen said softly, is not always about birth or blood. Sometimes it is earned in moments of courage and sacrifice. The weight of her words pressed against his chest. Ethan wanted to argue, to tell her that he was just a man who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But looking at her, he could see the truth in her eyes. She meant what she said. In the days that followed, Ethan learned more of the palace. The halls were endless, filled with creatures that glowed faintly, some with wings, some without, all moving with purpose. He was given food and water, clean clothes, and a small room that overlooked gardens of strange, radiant plants. Aurelia visited him often, darting through the palace corridors to find him. She laughed, leaving trails of glowing dust behind her, and sometimes she would climb into his arms, wrapping her tiny limbs around him in pure trust. Every time she did, the queen watched from a distance, her expression unreadable but her eyes soft, almost human in their emotion. One evening, as they sat together watching twin suns set behind crystal towers, the queen appeared quietly behind them. She didn't speak at first, only observed. Ethan noticed the weight in her gaze, the loneliness that came with being a ruler, a protector, and a mother all at once. Finally, she spoke. Your people, they have hearts like suns. You burn with passion, with loyalty, yet you never stop shining even when the world seems against you. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He had seen death, destruction, and cruelty in his life. Yet somehow this stranger, this alien queen, could see his heart in ways he had never imagined. He looked at Aurelia, then at the queen, and realized something. He had been brought here for a reason, and the world he had crashed into was not as alien as it first seemed. Compassion, courage, and loyalty. These were things that transcended planets, species, and stars, and in that moment, he understood. This strange, glowing world might hold more than danger. It might hold a purpose he had never dreamed of, and a bond he could not ignore. Ethan sat quietly, watching the suns dip below the horizon, and whispered to himself, I'll protect her, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe. Even in a world of unknown threats and alien wonders, a human heart still burned bright, and Ethan knew it would guide him through whatever came next. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan settled into the rhythm of the palace, though he never stopped feeling like a stranger in a world of crystal towers and glowing gardens. Yet, each time Aurelia ran into his room, laughing and leaving trails of sparkling light behind her, the walls of his isolation cracked a little. She had begun calling him guardian, a word she spoke with perfect innocence and trust. Every time she smiled at him, Ethan's chest tightened. She was small, fragile, and yet fierce in a way that humans rarely were. She had survived alone, in a world that could have swallowed her whole. The queen watched him from afar more than once. She never intervened, but her eyes followed Ethan's every movement. She saw how he fed Aurelia, how he comforted her when she had nightmares about the crash, and how he laughed at her tiny attempts to speak earth words. There was a softness to him, a warmth that could not be learned, a courage that did not come from weapons or power. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the palace, Ethan sat with Aurelia in a quiet garden filled with glowing flowers. He held a small device from his ship showing her pictures of Earth. She traced the images with tiny fingers, her eyes wide with wonder. "This is your home?" she asked in her musical tongue. "Yes," Ethan said softly, "but it's not my home anymore. Not yet." He hesitated, unsure how much he should reveal to a child who had already lost so much. "But one day you'll see it. I promise." Aurelia's smile was radiant, but her tiny hands clenched his sleeve tightly, as if she understood more than her words could express. Later, when the child slept, the queen approached Ethan quietly. He had been sitting on a crystal bench staring at the moon's reflection in a pond. "Your people," she began softly, "are extraordinary. You risked everything for a child you barely knew." "Not many could do that." Ethan shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. "I didn't think about that. I couldn't leave her there." The queen's silver eyes softened. Few understand that strength is not in weapons or power or crowns. True strength is in compassion. You have it in abundance. Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest. He was used to being praised for skill or courage, not for simply being human for feeling. I don't know what to say, he admitted. You need not say anything, the queen said, sitting beside him. I only wanted you to know that your actions matter, not just to me but to all of Virelia. You gave my daughter a chance. You gave me hope. For the first time since the crash, Ethan understood the depth of the situation. This was not just a strange planet. This was a world in which his choices, his humanity, had weight. Aurelia's life and the queen's trust rested on his courage, on his heart. I never thought I'd be part of something like this, Ethan confessed. I'm just a man from Earth. I'm not royalty. I don't belong here. The queen's gaze was steady. Belonging is not about birth or blood. You belong here because you acted with heart. That is stronger than any crown or title. You are part of this world now, whether you wish it or not. Ethan exhaled slowly, the truth of her words settling in his chest. He had been running, surviving, escaping. Yet here, for the first time, he felt needed, valued. He was more than a survivor. He was a protector. As the moons rose higher, Aurelia stirred in her sleep nearby. Ethan looked at her tiny, peaceful face and felt a surge of determination. No matter the dangers, no matter the enemies lurking beyond the palace walls, he would stand between her and the world. He would keep her safe, even if it meant sacrificing everything he had left of his human life. And somewhere deep inside, he realized that this strange, alien world full of light, color, and royalty had given him something he never expected, a reason to care, a reason to fight, and a reason to stay. For Ethan, being human had never felt so powerful. The palace glittered under the light of twin suns, but Ethan felt a strange tension pressing down on him. The halls, which had once felt alive with soft music and laughter, now seemed heavy with expectation. Word had spread quickly among the royal court. The human who had rescued the heir of Virelia was no longer just a guest. Everyone waited to see what the queen would decide. Ethan sat quietly in a crystal chamber, staring at the glowing floor. Aurelia played nearby, her laughter filling the space like wind chimes. But even her joy couldn't ease the knot in his stomach. He had no desire to become a pawn in alien politics. He was a survivor, a simple man from Earth, and the thought of being bound to a world he didn't fully understand made him uneasy. The doors opened, and the queen entered. Her silver robes flowed like liquid light, and her eyes, usually so calm, were filled with determination. She walked directly to Ethan and stopped in front of him. The room seemed to grow quieter, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Ethan Cole, she began, her voice steady and commanding. Your courage has been seen by all of Virelia. You risked your life to save my daughter when none of my warriors could. That is a deed of honor beyond measure. Ethan looked at her uncertain. I did what anyone would do. I didn't ask for anything. The queen's gaze softened. You think your actions were simple, but they are not. Few humans would act with such loyalty and selflessness. That is why. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. I claim you. From this day forward, you shall be known as the guardian of the royal bloodline. You will be bound to my family and under my protection for as long as you live. The court erupted in whispers. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had never imagined being claimed by a queen, especially not an alien one. I can't, he said, shaking his head. I'm not one of your people. I'm not royalty. I don't belong here. The queen stepped closer, her eyes shining like twin stars. Belonging is not about bloodlines or titles. It is about the courage to stand for others when they cannot stand for themselves. You belong here, Ethan, because you chose to protect what was helpless. That is a stronger bond than any crown could give. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to tell her that he was just a man from Earth who had stumbled into a strange world. But he couldn't deny the truth in her words. When he looked at Aurelia, playing nearby and watching him with wide, trusting eyes, he felt a deep responsibility settle over him. She was part of him now, and so was this world. You're asking me to give up everything I knew, he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. And yet, the queen said softly, you have already given up fear, hesitation, and doubt. You have given your heart. That is all I ask. For a long moment, Ethan stared at her, seeing both strength and loneliness in her glowing eyes. He thought of Earth, of the life he had lost in the crash. He thought of the danger that still loomed outside the palace walls, of the enemies who would come for the child.